Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. East Coast time. The U.S. Spiritist Federation is committed to presenting Spiritism to everyone. Please support our efforts with a donation at www.spiritist.us or by scanning the QR code on screen. As a reminder, the U.S. Spiritist Federation has released a weekly virtual course called Initiation into Spiritism every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. East Coast time. The next course is Lesson 14, Family in the Light of Reincarnation. Today, we have our special guest, Anna Moreno, whose topic is Searching for the Meaning of Life. Now, welcome, Anna. How are you?
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you guys again.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So before Anna shares her knowledge with us, let me introduce her more formally. Anna Moreno is the co-founder and president of the Chico Xavier Learning Center in Oregon, and was previously the president of the Joanna de Angelis Spiritist Society in the Bay Area in California. She came from a generation of Spiritists in Brazil. She was an active contributor at the Spiritist Federation of Sao Paulo, teaching various courses and working across multiple mediumship groups. Anna holds a master's degree in business administration and marketing with a graduate certificate in electrical engineering. She currently lives in beautiful Portland, Oregon. Thank you for being here, Anna.
Thank you for the introductions.
Okay, so remember everybody, please send in your questions because we will be open for a question and answer session after her talk. Okay, Anna, it's all yours.
So when I was thinking about the theme that we wanted to talk today, I, among all the things that the spiritists have taught us, with COVID hitting us 2 years ago, and mental health being a crisis and a subject that each one of us is really into these days, not only for adults, but also with our children, I decided to go with this theme of searching for the meaning of life. This is something that each one of us have been asking, why I'm here, what's going on in this planet these days that we feel like we are losing control of our reality. So what I would like to do this morning is basically step back and take a deep breath, thinking, okay, what we are doing, why all these different things have been hitting us from all sides. And on the moment that we would assume that transitioning to a better planet, why are we suffering so much and seeing so many of our brothers and sisters from other lands really suffering a lot? So as an agenda, the way that I would like to start is kind of giving a quick 2-year retrospective. What happened within our planet, what happened with us as human beings. Also, just reminding ourselves what type of planet is Earth and who are the people, the type of spirits that live on this planet. And then kind of closing out with some thoughts from science, like from our science, but also from the spiritual science and psychology coming from Joanna and Angelis in terms of search for meaning. So I invite each one of you to come on this journey with me, learning a little bit more about ourselves and what Joanna and Angelis have taught us. When we think in terms of us human beings, It's I got this picture thinking, okay, we've been living as machines, eating, surviving, reproduce. We go to work, we come back, we take off our care of our kids. We have this very, defined routine. But 2 years ago, everything changed. And even though it seemed like we were simplifying our routine because somehow we were locked inside our homes, it kind of created more disruption in our lives. And that disruption kind of hit us not only from the outside, not being able to do things that we used to be able to do, like, going to the gym or going to the movies or traveling, visiting our relatives, talking to our friends. Much more than that. It creates a lot of discussions about mental health and mindfulness and soulfulness and life purpose and what is quality of life and why I'm not happy, why I'm doing all this stuff, what is it for? We had to encounter with our families. We had to look at the mirror and see who we really are. So in 2 years, as described on Divaldo's book, we were on the edge of a third worldwide war. So in the book, for those who have not read, On the Way to a World of Regeneration, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda basically explains that us, people of this beautiful planet, were on the verge of making a very painful and horrible mistake. And then, in a way to save our planet from, a massive destruction, in something that would basically hold our progress for maybe millennia, we were hit by this deadly virus. And this deadly virus basically changed the humankind in the present, but mostly our future generations. On the other hand, we saw science working together in a way that they had never done it. So they were able to find vaccines, collaborate, and create some type of invisible shield that could at least partially protect us. So we could continue to live a kind of a normal life. And we know that, just earlier this week, we are hearing that, we don't need to wear masks inside the airplanes. And, we seem to be kind of living in a more safe zone, which we are not sure, as we see that the virus is still pretty intense in China. Nevertheless, we see this magical collaboration among science showing that when we put our efforts on the area, we can do things. We can create beautiful things and save people's lives. We also saw a wave of extraordinary movement around the social media. And social media, that is a technology or a set of various technologies that can basically enhance the quality of our lives, suddenly was flooded with truth and lies and confusing people about what exactly is going on. Is this virus really real? It's not real. Are people making this up just because of political reasons? So, considerations that are really mind-boggling, thinking that people are dying, that the situation has been as dramatic as it gets for a generation like myself on my 50s, that I have never seen anything like that. So I have not experienced a Second World War. I have not experienced any type of deadly virus. This is the worst that I have experienced, as well as my kids. On the other hand, we are able, with all this magical connection of technology, to see all the worst of the human beings as well. So we saw great violence. We saw lots of racism. We were able to bring to inside of our house a level of violence that we didn't know that existed. I heard questions from my kids saying why this is happening, why people are not treating each other as equals when we are all the same. So when we think about apps such as TikTok or Instagram, what we saw in these 2 years is that many people were looking for those 15 minutes of fame. So empowering things that are not as important as putting more importance on things that are not as important. So even if it's, body shape or fast cars or nice clothes, and then suddenly we have teens that got lost on that translation and are facing challenges of life because their values have been mixed up with all that flood of information coming from social media without taking in consideration that social media accepts anything we put in it. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not, it's in, and that's what they are digesting. So not leaving our houses was not only a challenge for ourselves because we are social beings, but many of us found that our house was not actually a home. And then we saw many marriages just breaking, people turning themselves into alcohol. Alcohol has not been as such a big social problem as these days. Drugs that we know that can seriously damage our brains, are legally accepted among adults, but also younger children. And many of us felt like we have an empty nest. So we have a family that is a portrait family, but it's a family that does not provide comfort, love, warmth, and we do not have where to go. We didn't have where to go. We couldn't run. We couldn't run to the airplanes, to work, to find unnecessary trips that we probably filled our calendars with. We couldn't flee into our workspaces, our offices, and book our calendars with dinners and breakfasts with people. We had to stay. And then when we think about God and the means that He uses us to teach important things, what comes to my mind is that we were set to basically sit and think. That thinking space that we usually put our kids in. That was the invitation for each one of us. We also got an invitation to find a boundary between work and life. Everybody talks about work and life balance. Is that balance really real? When we start meetings at 6 a.m. at home, and those meetings continue to end at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., what about our kids? Our relationships? Our spouse? How are they filling up their lives? Nurturing their hearts? And then the other thing that COVID brought us was an enlightenment in terms of our impacting nature, that for those couple weeks that we were locked in, we saw nature basically reviving itself, animals showing up in places that they didn't show up before because they couldn't because of us. Or skies that were not blue were blue again in India or in China because there was not enough pollution to basically disguise the beautiful sky. So the message here is that in 2 years, we had the opportunity to see how interconnected we are. Not only interconnected as within our own homes, but interconnected with our neighbors, interconnected among countries, because COVID hit in China, and suddenly here we don't have toilet paper. How is that possible? Interconnected in a way that I may see someone that I love, and I may share a deadly virus and hurt someone that I didn't want to. Interconnected in a way that the way that I treat nature, I treat the animals, is impacting the whole ecosystem. So we learned that we are all one. And I keep thinking about that U2 song. There's no separation among us. And when I say that, there's no separation among us incarnated and disincarnated, and spirits too. There's no separation among us and nature. There's no separation among us and animals. And until we learn that there's no separation even between us and God, we will continue to go on the wrong direction. With the discovery of that we are one people, one planet, we also found out that our happiness is connected with other people's happinesses. It's very hard for me to be happy, even though I live in beautiful Portland, as Peter said, knowing that my family in Brazil is suffering, that my family in Brazil is happy. It's very hard for me to be happy when I know that my brothers and sisters in Ukraine are having their cities bombed and destroyed. The other thing that we found out is that I cannot put on other people's hands my happiness. I cannot put on things my happiness. I cannot put a name, a number on my happiness that comes from outside. The only person who is able to create happiness or unhappiness for me is myself. All the advertisement that I see, that I need this car, this house, this job, this purse, this body, this family, this dog. Not true. And if we try to convince ourselves that without that we're not going to be happy, even in the moment that we conquer that, we will continue to be unhappy. How to explain that? How is that even possible? We have so many ways that we can go. And we continue to feel lost, to see the options. The options were obvious. During these 2 years, the criteria of what was good and bad, the criteria of who was important for us in terms of family, friends, was based on the value that they bring to us, the peace of mind. Because we were not able to jump on planes, visit beautiful beaches. We were relying on that inner circle of people that really cared about us, and we cared about them. That we felt that we could exchange love, trust, our deepest secrets. And that level of relationship that really gave us a lot in terms of meaning of life. I bet that many of you, many of us, during these past 2 years, have dreamed the amount of friends, their priorities, what we do. Some of us have changed completely our routines in terms of diets, in terms of friendships, the way that we spend our time, the books we read, the way that we approach life. Why? Because some of us have realized that trying to be happy, doing things that make us unhappy, didn't have a future. That fulfilling our lives with empty relationships didn't add any value. That spending money on things that were not that important didn't make us happy. That the abstract, the unseen, the intangible, the invisible was many times much more important for us than what things that we could touch. I come from the Bay Area, and one of the things that we realized after we moved to Portland, and we moved to Portland because of our jobs, was that the quality of life, and we left the Bay Area 5 years ago, was really diminishing since we moved to the States 20 years ago, also because of our jobs. And it didn't seem to have an end. I mean, you work, the pace, the technology pace, it's enchanting. I mean, I love technology. It's engaging, it's challenging, but it's very intense and stressful too. And then we moved to Portland and we realized that there is a different pace of doing things. There's a different way of looking at the nature and enjoying the nature. And with COVID, there was a second wave, which was that, how am I using my hours? Is my work fulfilling? Life is so short and fragile. Is this the place that I want to be? And people who continue to work as crazy as they used to, running the midnight oil, not having boundaries, not taking care of their health, worrying much more about the deliverables from their jobs instead of their own health. We're getting burned out. And interesting enough, in a country full of opportunities and full of very specialized labor, we now have lots of jobs and not enough people to fulfill them. From hostess in restaurants into high-skilled engineers. How do you explain that? Why? It wasn't like that before. It's not like, people just disappeared and then there are no more people to fulfill. No. Why? Because many of us took a time to think, is this really what's important for me? I've been working on this for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. Is this making me happy? Is this meaningful? Is this the life that I wanted? Because we grew up with some guidelines, some beliefs that we learned from inherited from our parents in terms of, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to achieve this to be successful and to be happy. And then we get older and we think, is this really what makes me happy? Or this was my parents' dreams, what they wanted? Is this what I wanted? Right now we have a world that a large part of the people are living busy lives with empty hearts. They have attended prestige schools. They have jobs that are ended. But that they are not happy. They're anxious. They are depressed. They feel lonely. They think about suicide. So, Divaldo Franco with Joanna de Angelis have worked in a series of books that is the psychological line from a spiritual perspective that Joanna de Angelis has wrote. And Joanna de Angelis, as we know, is the guide spirit for Divaldo Franco. Extremely knowledgeable on the human relationship. Her books are very profound, intense, and difficult to read. And there's this book that I'm not sure if there is a translation into English. It's called In Search for Truth. This is the book. And there are many of them that Joanna de Angelis has dictated. This one I thought that was very timely for the moment that we are living right now. And interesting enough, this book was written in 2009, so way before COVID. But as always, Joanna de Angelis is right on, as André Luiz was right on 6 years ago, talking about subjects that today are so current and important. So she says, in every period of crisis, indecision and loss of existential meaning of society, changes occur, some radical in relation to what has already been experienced, to what is known, in the form of a desire to be freed from previous castrating impositions. So we have had an opportunity to turn and evaluate our material beliefs, our span of attention, validate our feelings, our behaviors. We are now in a critical moment of our lives as eternal spirits. And I'm not talking about as Anna Moreno, as the human being, this incarnation. We are now in a moment that we can pay more attention to what choices we have made. What type of world do we live in? Why all of those things is happening right now? We have an opportunity that instead of just observing what is around us, also observe what happens outside, how that triggers our emotions, our feelings, our sense of happiness or unhappiness, fulfillment or emptiness. We can pay more attention to the messages that we generate within ourselves. We can take this as an opportunity to choose the direction that we want to move forward, the direction that we want this planet to move forward. When we go to the Spirit's book, and for those who are beginners on Spiritism, this is the first book that you probably want to read. Because in this book that talks about the philosophical aspect of the spiritual doctrine, Kardec basically covers questions that all of us have. And the answers are not given by Kardec. These answers are given by the spirits that are part of the team of superior spirits who work with Jesus. So in question number 100, Kardec talks about the spiritual hierarchy. This hierarchy is based on the degree of development, the qualities we have, and of course, the imperfections that we still carry. And the spirits, they basically bucketize in 3 big areas. And the way that they're organized was that we are in the first one, imperfect spirits. We still live on a planet of trials and suffering. We are really on the bottom category of imperfect spirits. And we all suffer not because God wants. God wants us to be happy, to be fulfilled. Our suffering comes as a result of our actions, of our choices. Our choices that we made this life, but also in previous lives. With the aid of this classification, it's easy to determine who we are and why we live in a planet that is so poor in terms of morale, even though we know that science has developed so much. And usually that's how we see. We see science really growing faster ahead of the moral aspect. With the development of our moral aspect, we'll see, unlike what we see here on earth, that soon enough we're going to have the predominance of spirit over matter, which means that instead of thinking in a very selfish way, we'll be using more the pronoun we instead of I. And with that, we will be more concerned about doing the goodness for the group instead of just prioritizing my own needs. Until a point that we become pure spirits, which meaning we do not have any influence of matter whatsoever, which means that we do not make more mistakes, which means that we do not need to reincarnate. Because the reincarnation happens as long as we need to repent, as long as we are making mistakes. At the moment that I have this moral superiority, and I don't make mistakes, I don't need to suffer anymore, because suffering is always a consequence of previous actions or ignorance. So, based on the type of morality and quality of thoughts that we live in, we see that suffering is still part of us, is still part of Earth, is a mechanism of growth. It is an opportunity for us to evaluate our choices. So as Jesus said 2,000 years ago, it's impossible to find happiness here on earth. It's impossible to find happiness on the material realm. That's why he said that my happiness comes from another place. My kingdom is not from this world. Because this is a world of suffering and pain. We are imperfect spirits still living in an imperfect world where there's pain and suffering. So this belief that we can be happy here, that we can be forever happy, all time happy, is a utopia. It's some type of, story that we read in the Old Testament about the lost paradise, or stories, lullaby stories that we tell our children, and we still believe that as adults. We are not there yet. We need to work hard. We need to really put our will into the right direction to become better people, to work on our inner reform, inside out, to find that happiness, because the happiness will come from our inner peace. And that inner peace comes from our actions. When we think in terms of the way that the humanity has developed, the evolution of humankind have experienced huge changes in form, in organs, on brains, intelligence, feelings. As animals, we had our instinct very developed, and that instinct was really critical to our conservation, to our defense, to our protection. But after we became human beings, reason and conscience, intelligence was added to that instinct. As we advanced, we also learned how to love, how to protect, how to care to others. Nevertheless, we still carry that instinct, and that instinct saves our lives so many times. It's still very important for our development and survival here on earth. But it should not be used all the time. We have conquered love and intelligence, and we need to use it. Instead of reacting, we need to act. And to act, we need to think first. When we see the way that the world is behaving lately, we wonder how much is based on instinct of, I want to be stronger, and then I'm aggressive. I want to be more powerful, and then I put more violence. So instead of putting the latest qualities, talents that we have earned as human beings, even inside our homes. I was thinking in terms of more broadly when I was saying that. But our relationships start at home. How do I treat my children? How I speak to my husband, to my wife, to my partner? What type of consideration I have with my parents and my relatives? Is my relationship based on exchange, an interest exchange, or is it love? Do I treat people well because I want something back? Could be comfort, money, safety, protection. Or I treat them well because that's the right thing to do. As parents, we have children. I would say many times, we have children just because that's what society expects us to have, to do as a family, grow. And we put on those children our frustrations and expectations and the achievements that we could not reach. And we pressure and pressure and pressure them. We pressure them to do all types of sports, to be A players, to be good at school, to be in the best school if we can pay. Are they happy? Are we expecting compensation for that? Because in many cases, those kids grew up feeling empty inside. Because more than nice clothes, nice schools, 5 different sports a week, what they really needed was us to have their back, to hear their cries, the cries that many times they don't even say. What type of effort do we put in our careers? Is it much bigger than the effort that we put inside our homes, inside our families? We cannot have a world of contentment, of respect, of love, without having families that live based on these beliefs. I cannot expect to have a future adult that respect earth and animals and others if that adult has not learned that when a child is at home. So we see after 2 years of COVID, kids 10, 12 years old committing suicide. Depressed, having to take drugs adult drugs, because they feel empty. They lost the connection with their friends at school, such important relationship. And they didn't find the support at home that they needed to give them that extra boost that they miss so much. When God is awakened inside our hearts, inside our families, that gives us a spiritual meaning into our lives. But for many of us, we have faced some type of atrophy with religion, because religion has been politicized or has been translated into external ceremonies that do not give us contentment nor fulfillment. Science many times try to prove that God doesn't exist, forgetting that there's no creation without the Creator. There's no explanation that they can find that has shown how things really began. Even though the religions may have their mistakes because they are created by men, the aim of religion is really to connect us, the religare in Latin, between the creature and the Creator, who gives us a sense of protection, of meaning. As it is important for a child to feel that protection for their material parents, the same way we all need to know that there is this bigger thing, much bigger than us, that gives us a sense of a direction, a North Star to our lives, showing us, there is a reason why we are here. I'm looking out for you. But we need to search for it. We need to be interested in finding it, not fighting it. When I was preparing this presentation, in the same week, two friends of mine talked about a book, actually not an author called Dan Siegel, that I'm gonna talk to him about him later on in this presentation. And I thought that was very interesting how science was combining with what Joanna de Angelis says in her book about, the searching of meaning, the searching of happiness within us, where she basically points out that when we have a selfish mind, an egoic mindset, somehow we lose the breath of freedom and we become prisoners, slaves of things that we get attached to. So the attachment, in fact, can be translated as chains that we wrap ourselves into. So it's kind of a madness that we forget who we are and we translate that from what we have. So we become what we have instead of just be. We put effort in our passions, in our vices, in our immediate satisfaction. And then in the long term, we become lonely beings that are suffering the consequences of all the selfish actions that we had. So, what are the assets? What are the real things? If we open LinkedIn, we see work, titles, our friends being promoted. Instagram, incredible bodies, wealth, power. Are these assets? No. No, they are just temporary loans that we receive from God. These are not our real assets, not even our family, because when we die, we leave them. Not even our body. The real assets that we have are the things that we do to others. The good things that we do to others, the kindness, the love. When we continue to work our life just thinking about things that we want to conquer, thinking that, okay, this will give me peace. And then we see all those billionaires that are profoundly unhappy because when enough is enough. The book of André Luiz called Liberation tells about the story of a pope called Gregory, who made very unthoughtful choices while on earth. And he is in the area that we call umbral or hell. I mean, really an area of very ignorant and evil spirits. And at some point at that book, towards the end, we learn that he needs to go back. He needs to come back to reincarnate again. And André Luiz, on chapter 12 of that book, he has the instructor Gubbio comparing ourselves to a tree, which I thought it was a very poetic, beautiful comparison. He says that the physical vessel is like a tree, limited in space and time. The perispiritic body is the fruit that embodies the result of the three values after a certain period of maturation. And the mental vessel is the seed that represents the tree's substract. So what I mean about that is that in order to conquer wisdom, happiness, love, we need to have this seed that combines that through the various lives. So until we are able to bear consistently sweet fruit to others, we'll not be happy. With Joanna de Angelis in her book, she kind of bases in three folds: the individuation, which means that our concept of life in our interrelationship with others and God; the individualism, which are the qualities that when we know that we have the knowledge, our outer ego; and then the individualism, that is the distinctive qualities that we have, our outer ego; and then the individualities that are still the selfish behaviors that we develop. So somehow we need to move ourselves from the individuality, just me, to understanding I as an eternal spirit, to go in a broader sense and into the individuation, which is the relationship that I have, or interrelationship with I have with others. So it's like kind of a progressing that seed that in the beginning doesn't even give fruit, to a seed that will give flowers, to a seed that will bear flowers and fruit and sweet fruit to others. So until we produce to others, it will be very hard to be happy. So the way that I see the realization of who we are, and this is Anna talking, is that the first step is really our self-development. So the inner form, knowing who we are. We need to understand our goods and bads. We need to understand our triggers. The second aspect is our consciousness that we are connected to everything, to other people, incarnated and disincarnated. And that's where mediumship plays a key role into our lives. because we think that we are just connected with people we see. That's not what we live. That's not how we live. That's not what we learn from the Spirit's book. That's not what we learn from the Medium's book. The second thing is that we are one with nature. The fact that we need to take care of our planets. We are connected to the animals. We are connected to the plants. We are connected to the planets. And not only this planet. We know that interchange of thoughts go beyond our planet. And above all, the connection that we have between us, creature, with the Creator, with God. Until we are able to go that route, it's very hard to be happy, to find meaning. And the connection with others based on mediumship, that is an organic faculty. And this is very important to understand. All of us are mediums. There is no barrier between the physical and the spiritual realm. I can say I don't want that, but that doesn't mean that doesn't exist. The manifestation of an expression of the spirit is a reality in everyone's life. Of course, we can develop that faculty with practice. But we know from Kardec's books, saying that the interference that we receive from the spirit is much larger than any one of us can dream. We do have a duality of body, psyche, mind, matter, because we are immortal spirits. This is just an envelope that is going to be here after our life in matter ends, because we never die as spirits. Our unconscious being, not Anna, my unconscious being, is a plethora of collective, not individual experiences. It's a combination, it's a sum of everything that happened between myself and everybody else in my previous lives. That's who I am. So the anxiety, the anguish, the fear, the happiness is based on that. It's not only based on what I did in this life. And that's why I get so confused many times. That's why it gets hard to find the meaning of this life, because we keep looking for the meaning in this life when it's not here. It's not on the now. André Luiz explains that the mind is not on the brain. And science, as I was saying, with Dr. Dan Siegel, finally is saying that. Joanna de Angelis has been repeating that several times, that the spirit or self with capital S is the reality beyond time, is the body and the immortal being that preserves all the events that we have lived, that has a combination of our thoughts. And these thoughts basically impregnate all the cells of our body, creating diseases. And this is very important for us to understand as well, because the way that we think will be the reality of who we are and how we feel. Not only happy and unhappy, but sick or healthy. These impressions that the mind creates basically mold our spirit, our perispirit, which molds our bodies as well, creating conflicts of conduct, disorders, phobias, or idealism and meaning. So with Joanna de Angelis in the book, In Search for the Truth, on chapter 9, she talks about this importance of this getting inside. She talks about meditation exercises, yoga practice, edifying readings, and then thinking about what we have learned, this connection with the Creator through prayer. This will dilute unhappy impressions. This will trigger good memories. This will open our hearts to our superconscious, and we will feel the love of our divine God. So then Siegel, he created what he called the healthy mind platter. So what he did is something very simple, but very profound and easy to understand. He's a professor of the University of California, LA, and he's also a best-selling author. And he has been a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist for years. And the way that he approaches mind is that he understands that mind and brain are not the same thing. He understands that the brain is just the instrument, and the mind is the real pianist behind it. And his approach is that we do need to nurture our mind with 7 essential activities to create well-being. This is very important, because when we read these very simple 7 activities, many of us don't do half of them. And when we look at the books from André Luiz, the books that talk about brain, we see the same thing. These books from André Luiz were written 60 years ago. So the first thing that Dr. Dan Siegel says is about the focus time, which is when we look at our goal-oriented activities, how we connect the brain with those activities. Then the playtime, which is basically our creative, playful, and joyful time. Then the third thing, which is something that we lost a lot with COVID, that I think we are trying to relearn how to do, is the connect time, how we connect with people, how we take time to appreciate that connection with nature, how we integrate the brain in an interrelational way. And he talks about physical time, that science has been banging us on that, the importance of moving our bodies, walking, exercising in general. He talks about time in, which is basically the way that we reflect internally. The downtime, the non-focus, basically the relaxing time, the way that we leave our mind to wander a little bit so we can have our brain recharged. And sleep time. Our body needs a rest. And we know that during the sleep time is when our spirit basically leaves our body and is able to receive information and guidance in a more open way from the superior spirits. That's how we consolidate the learning. That's how we recover from all the different experience that we have here on Earth. And Dr. Siegel had another graphic that I thought that was very interesting, which is called the Wheel of Awareness. And he puts ourselves like Anna, like the eagle on the hub. And the central hub, it represents our awareness, knowing. And the round, the perimeter of the circumference is what we are aware of. So we can send a spoke out to the rim, which is the perimeter, and focus our attention to one point or many points. But this is a visual metaphor that shows how we integrate ourselves with the external world, and we can focus on areas that we want for how long we want. But when we choose to be an observer, we detach from the fact itself. And that is very helpful because it dilutes the stress, because it puts things under perspective. So we can be pulled out of the situation and make better decisions, reducing anxiety, reducing depression. So closing the puzzle here, it's part of life to suffer, to face pain, but we can decide how much we want to suffer. The pain that we live is just a consequence of our past actions. We cannot go back. We cannot change the past. But we have an opportunity to benefit from the learnings of today and grow. But how? If we take in consideration to live a life that has more balance, more harmony, we will be achieving this aspired happiness in our future. We can change the future by changing the way that we live the present. We do not control the future, we control the present. So whatever the psychological, physical, mental choices that I make today will result in a sum of experiences that I'm building for the future. How I deal with the experience today, like we saw with Dr. Siegel on the hub and the rim, is much important than the experience itself, than the fact itself. The problem is not the problem is how I deal with the problem. So, as we work with our collective conscious, meaning our self with capital S, trying to understand what are the archetypes that I am bringing throughout these previous reincarnations, we can better live our lives. The first step is really to awake our self-awareness, and different people may have different tools to do that, but this is a change that is necessary for our moral growth. Without knowing our blind spots, we cannot change them. The second step is really unmasking our ignorance and diluting our shadow, as Joanna de Angelis says so many times. So the more goodness we do, we dilute those errors from the past, and then we move forward to achieving the long, desired goal of happiness. If we continue to find excuses that I don't have time, my parents didn't teach me, I hate my dad because he did that. So we transfer responsibility that should be mine. So the errors of my parents, my family, my whoever are their responsibility. I need to own my behaviors. I cannot be victim of the story that I came from. That story is a consequence of the past actions. Today, I need to look for tools, psychological tools, medical tools, spiritual tools, to basically build a new self. We cannot avoid that responsibility much longer if we want to progress with our planet, to a planet that will be more good than bad, more love than suffering. But that requires our sacrifice. Joanna de Angelis tells us that it's on us to make these choices around existential goals, working to achieve these goals that we are aiming for. So it's not only seeing the goals, not only having the willingness to achieve the goals, but to work those, and that's a lot of work. We know that. But that's why we are here. We have the opportunity to apply the eternal values, what we're learning with the spiritists, with the spiritists in our day-to-day lives, we have the opportunity to connect with others with love and kindness and build a more fulfilling life. Because the more we give, the more we receive. So I thank you all for the opportunity of having me today. And Peter, back to you.
Thank you, Anna. Very thoughtful presentation, very big subject to talk about. So we have some questions. The first one is, and this is from the U.S. Spiritist Federation, is humanity elevated enough now to avoid a third world war?
I don't think we know that. I think it is on our own hands to make that decision. We have all the examples of the past to know the level of suffering. But I think that's the point, that we can see how sometimes we do not learn from history, all the suffering. But no matter what happens, third world war, no third war, that doesn't make a difference for us. Why? Because we don't die. As eternal spirits, even if there is a third world war, this is not something that we should be anxious for. Because one of the bases of Spiritism is the multiplicity of planets. So if it's not Earth, we'll go to another planet. But those who made those choices to harm the planet, to harm others, will be responsible for those choices. So instead of being anxious or suffering about if that's going to happen or not, more important is to think what I am doing right now to make Earth, to make this planet, to make my family a better place.
Those are very good points. Yes. And next question. Is humanity, that's the same question. Okay, one moment. Okay, from the International Spiritist Council. How do we maintain a healthy balance between our personal and professional lives?
Yeah, and I think that some people were saying that now work is at their home. Yeah, and that's why I like so much the Mind Platter graphic that Dr. Dan Siegel created, because that gives us like a route, a graphic view of things that we should populate in our daily lives. We know that we all need to survive, that work is part of our responsibility, is one law, is one divine law, is to work, right? But there are other things that are important too. So setting that boundaries, disconnecting, and I would say mostly disconnecting from our kind of portable devices, because today we all have laptops and cell phones and smart watches that keep kind of pinging it. So we see a lot of examples of people saying, okay, turn off notifications, block your calendar, put your mental health appointments as important, at the same level as any other. So you need to see the doctor, you have a psychotherapist, you need to go to the gym, you need to walk your dog, you put half an hour to spend time with your son. So the same way that you address your schedule for your professional routines, address that to your personal lives too. Because it's very easy to be sucked up. And one thing that I've learned from my professional life, the hours in the day are never enough to finish. There will always be something left. So it's on us to define when enough is enough for the day, and then prioritize and balance our lives with what we've been living. We learned with Dr. Siegel, but also with Joanna, Angelis, Sandra Luis, and his books too.
So we must always pay close attention to what we're doing.
Because we are eternal spirits. And then if we keep living our lives just with the immediate needs as this being, as me, myself, as the ego, not the self, I will lose my entire incarnation, because I may have a wonderful professional life, but a broken marriage, or kids that lived with no parents. So when my main responsibility in this life, above all, for those who have families, is their families.
Absolutely. Thank you. And next question. How can we see the glass half full when we are going through very difficult times on our personal life?
Yeah, that's very difficult. When going back to Danzigo, I think kind of getting us out of the problem and observing it and asking ourselves, what's the benefit of this opportunity? What do I need to learn from it? From a difficult marriage, do I need to learn more patience? Do I need to learn more forgiveness? Do I need to rethink about my actions, the way that I treat others, my words? So every suffering is an opportunity for us to reevaluate our behaviors and ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And change. We cannot change others, but we can change ourselves, which is very hard. Right?
Yeah. But very important. Okay, last question. Does an imbalance within ourselves of intellectual and moral progress affect our happiness?
Absolutely. And we know that we have brilliant minds as leaders of countries or scientists that have very little moral progress. We also see through history that some of the biggest scientists who made very disruptive inventions commit suicide after finding out the impact of their discoveries. So while it's much easier for us as eternal beings to develop our intelligence, we need to work on our moral progress too. Because without our moral progress, we cannot be happy. Every action that we have has a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Every good action has a consequence. Every bad action has a consequence. So why, until I'm able to do this exercise of getting to know myself better, improve my awareness, therefore becoming a better version of myself, I will continue to suffer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, thanks, Anna.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank you. Yeah. And thank you, everyone who watched this live. And we thank all of you who have been following our weekly talks. And once again, thank you for supporting our efforts with a donation at our website, www.spiritist.us, or the QR code on screen. The Spiritist U.S. Spiritist Federation does contribute by disseminating information on Spiritism in English, and there are publications that are being planned, and this always requires funds, so your support is greatly appreciated. Next Saturday, April 30th, we will have Marcelo Medeiros. The theme will be patience and tolerance. That's a big subject too. And now, before we end our live, Anna, can you please say a final prayer for us?
Yes, absolutely. So let's take a deep breath, connecting with ourselves. Listening to all the sounds around us, sensing the vibration, the peaceful vibration around us. the smells, connecting with our superior spirits that have guided this meeting, thanking them for this opportunity of learning and growth. So important to have a break on our days, to rethink about our lives, the way that we are living our days and hours. If we are living, if our behaviors reflect the goals that we have stated. Dear God, bless our seed of faith, our will to become better beings. Protect the institution of the family, bringing parents and children together. May they love each other, respect each other. Protect those who suffer any type of suffering, physical, moral, spiritual, in all realms, all beings. Dear God, bring peace to our globe, our beautiful planet, our blue planet. May all the evolved spirits inspire the leaders of nations worldwide, support those peoples who suffer. May your love, protection guide each one of us. We also ask for Spiritist in its values. May we carry the lessons and teachings of Jesus with us, within us, all hours of our day, not only this couple of hours that we are together, but may we live these teachings in the way that we think, we feel, we act every day. Thank you for the United States Spiritist Federation for this opportunity of connecting ourselves. So important to belong. May this group grow in strength, in knowledge, and in love. Thank you.